from Venus, a man or from Mars will never understand each other. But what if the secret to connection isn't about gender at all? What if it is about balancing the qualities we all have inside of us, like strength and sensitivity, logic and intuition? Let's dive into the world of masculine and feminine energy today. Welcome to Bridging Universes, the podcast with, as your hosts, Jack and Nadine.
First of all, what I want to say is welcome everybody. I hope everyone's having a very nice day. Wherever you're listening to this, you may be sitting in your car, you may be sat on your bed with your headphones, you may be in the forest somewhere, right? I'd love to be there.
Ooh.
Wherever you are, our beautiful listeners, we want to just say hello and wish you, first of all, a very good day.
And we invite you inside and listen to us talk, but absolutely think about what your opinions are. We want you to be in the room with us and to really think about what is your stance on this, because it's not about listening to our opinion or our visions or our knowledge. It is generally about finding your own perspectives on this.
Right, Nadine, what are we talking about today? I've been so excited to get into this subject because it is one that baffles me still and something that came to my knowledge about 1 or 2 years ago and it blew my mind.
Today's episode is going to be about the masculine and the feminine energy,
Ooh.
which sounds a bit cryptic. We're like, ooh, energies. I really want to say we're not talking about men and women. We're not talking about gender here. Because one thing a lot of people think is like, oh, but I am a woman, so I have to be feminine. I'm a man, and I have to be masculine. And we're here to break your world and be like, hey, actually, we're all human and we all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us.
As you said, it doesn't mean that a man can't have feminine energy and a woman can't have masculine energy, which I find I never knew that was possible. I didn't know that was a thing, and there'll be other that may be listening that may have never even heard of the concept of having masculine and feminine energies, which we both have.
Let me burst your bubble a little bit more, because actually the way we all think about like man and a woman is literally a social construct we've created, because we have the sexed, like the biological signs, which is just our body. And then we have the concept of man and the concept of woman, which we all think have stereotypes on and we have ideas on. But these are actually social constructs, which means that we as a society have created that, which also changes from culture to cultures. And this is something I learned in law school when I was studying human rights. It's like gender is a social construct. A man is not all of those things we think it is. That's just an idea that we've all took on as like our truth.
Where do you think it comes from? Like, where do you think like that first began? Because for me, I think definitely growing up, I always thought that being a man, you know, I wasn't, or it was almost frowned upon to have like feminine like qualities, or feminine attributes. And I think that is one of the society things that gets conditioned in us is we reject those feminine sides of us as men. So I guess that, like you're saying, the society creates those two like archetypes, doesn't it?
I wouldn't even call it the archetypes. It's like generally just ideas that are so toxic and so bad. If we look at the stereotypes, indeed, like you said, like man cannot cry, men have to be strong. It's such a restrictive thinking. And for me, I think that it starts with a little bit with the way our brains function, which is we like structure, we like putting things in boxes, we like understanding. And it is easy to understand the world from, okay, a man is this, a woman is this, and now I understand the world and this is how we're going to navigate it. But it is so stupid because it's not benefiting men, it's not benefiting women, it's not benefiting anyone who identifies as anything else. It's just making all of our lives harder. So yeah, what do you think are like really painful stereotypes for men and women?
Me personally, I don't know about other people, but me personally, growing up in a family of men that were very strong and resilient and never showed emotion and were always very precise and clear cut and strong and hardworking. And I grew up in a family where my dad is proud himself on those qualities, and they are qualities to be proud of. To have strength, to to have manners, to be very like I'm the one that holds things together, and I'm the one that goes to provide, and I'm the support, and I'm the protection, and all of these things. Right, growing up, a weakness in my eye was to show emotion, was to be creative, and I think for the female, I think in some way it's sort of to go out and be the one that earns the money and to have this very like structured business and be the businesswoman. And I think it's very important to have, like I said, have this, we'll go into it, but the balance. But I think that is one of the things now that even now it's frowned upon in some communities. I know some people, my dad would definitely say it's probably one of those, like my mum was like the nurturer, my mum was doing like the cooking and cleaning, and it's that very old school like way of life, which I feel a lot of people have had, and a lot of people have been brought up in that family dynamic. So I think things are changing, and I think it's changing for the better. But I think a lot of people just don't understand what it is to be masculine and feminine, and the two, behaviors that go with that, and the ways of life that go with that. So
Thank you for sharing. Because the first thing I would love to question is like, I know the stereotype and I know where you're coming from, but what is strong? Like, how do we define this masculine, I don't show emotions, I keep it all together as strong? And is that actually strong? Are we actually keeping it together? Or are we just suppressing it and it will come back
mm,
in your face? To me, strength is something completely different. To me, strength is being able to sit with your emotions. To me, strength is to be able to voice your emotions. Like, for example, something really bad happens, and there are emotions all in the dynamic between men and women. To me, strength is being the one who can voice those emotions, open up that conversation in a vulnerable way without like bursting
yeah.
out in emotions, without pointing fingers. It's such a funny and interesting thing how a lot of us have grown up like seeing not showing emotions as strength. I vividly remember my mom was an emotional woman, which I adore, and right now I am as well. But when I grew up, I would be so ashamed at my mom for crying. My mom would cry anytime I would do something amazing or something beautiful or bad happened. And I was so ashamed. I found it terrible. Right now, I do exactly the same. Now I'm the one crying. And like, first I saw that crying as weakness, and now I see it as a strength because we're able
Mm.
to show that.
I love a good
Uh,
cry.
like a cry is
I
amazing.
love a good cry now. Crying is such a good release, and as we know, it actually releases toxins from your body. Like it actually flushes them out. It's not very often that I do cry, and that's sort of like a suppression. I'm able to regulate myself quite well now to the point where I don't feel like that happens as much. But when I do, I welcome it. Like yes, I'm crying. Like oh, have a real good cry because it's really good for you.
I think it's beautiful, and it's also so good to just be able to be in touch with your emotions, to feel your emotions. That is also such a thing that so many of us don't have. Like, we
Mm,
suppress all of them. So it's such a beautiful way to just feel them and allow them to flow
mm,
through us. Because emotions are not meant to stay in the body. Emotions are just little signals that come in and go like an ocean, and it's so beautiful.
mm,
And another thing I wanted to kind of like hop back in on is I love the whole thing of like women now becoming also the breadwinner and those roles going differently. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, but that is kind of like women still trying to fit in the societal norms that we've created for men, which is
mm,
in the end, in my personal opinion, not what we're made for. Our hormones go in around 28 days, which is not the same as the 24-hour hormones that a man has. The typical
Mm,
9 to 5 job with a female body being in touch with the hormones, our body is not fully made for that. So I feel it is time for this radical step higher up where we're allowing the world to just be a little bit different and to not hold on to those societal norms we've created. Realize that we can work hard by being in touch with ourselves. We can work hard by being true to ourselves and just
mm,
flowing in our natural rhythm and having the more cyclical living, which is a really beautiful way of living.
mm,
Absolutely a topic for another day, but that is also with the feminine and masculine, and that
mm,
is the way our physiology works.
mm. There's one thing I wanted to ask you when you were talking. You were saying about suppression of emotions and how we
Mm-hmm.
suppress our emotions. How how can that show up? Like, what happens if we suppress emotions? How does that show up in a way of like, do we notice it physically? Do we notice it like mentally?
Honestly, I feel like it shows up in so many ways, but it is so normal right now for everyone to suppress emotions that we're not even that aware of it. It shows up mentally with a lot of mental clutter, a lot of stress, a lot of like do not really
Mm,
being able to think straight because there's so much in our brain. It shows up in the body, like in the end, suppressing emotions leads to stress. And I dare to be as bold as to say a lot of nowadays diseases that we have all ground in stress and suppressed emotions because all of that tension has to go somewhere. For example, when I would have a lot of things I'm not saying. It's very common to problems with the throat and to not
mm,
be able to speak anymore, to get an infection. And also, suppressed emotions just really show up in physical discomfort, emotional
mm,
discomfort, where we kind of lose that control over our emotions, where we are just kind of getting super angry at something else. Example, I was walking on the street, three people were like whistling at me, and I just got a bit upset. And then I didn't really do anything with it. I put it away. I was like, it's fine. Then the fourth person is gonna whistle at me on the street, and that person is gonna get this whole like their face, which is a really clear sign of, hey, okay, yeah, this anger was something that came out of his action or her action,
mm,
but it was also way too big. It was this overreacting. If we suppress them when they come out, it's going to be like a volcano. It's going to be like,
mm,
but mostly I would say you can really feel the effects in the physical body and in the energy body as well. Like our energy just gets stuck in certain places. And when the energy doesn't fully flow, we are going to
mm,
see it in the way we function on a day to day basis.
mm.
Uh,
Do you think? Do you think that, like you said, we as men tend to reject the feminine because we see femininity to be emotions, you know? Say for instance for like emotions, I used to see that as like a feminine trait. Obviously we know polarity, right? We have to have one, we have to have to have masculine, we have to have feminine. So if we're too far in the masculine and we're too far in that, there's going to be this imbalance the whole time, right? And that's going to show up in different ways. Like you said, if we're constantly suppressing that and we're constantly shaming that and putting that away and going, that's not me. Like, I don't cry, you know, like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. That suppression just leads to, like we said before, you know, that suppression gets stuck in the body. I was actually listening to another podcast um, about somatics and how emotions get locked in the body. And it's fascinating how over such a long period of time, we can store so much of that just in the body, and then we wonder why we have these problems with digestion and problems with blood flow, problems with circulation.
I feel like it's not only man pushing away the feminine. I feel that we as a society are doing this. It's not a problem that only men are doing, or only women, or only people who identify as non binary. We as a society are kind of putting the feminine down, but that is also a really small version of the feminine, and we're seeing a really small version of the masculine. And maybe before we get
Mm,
into this, it's good to get into what we see as the masculine and feminine energy. So I would love to
for
ask you,
sure.
like, how do you see the masculine energy? How do you see feminine energy? Because right now we were really talking about those stereotypes, and it's good to back to what is the masculine and feminine energy. As I said, everyone has the masculine and feminine energy inside of us, but what is it?
For me, I would say that the feminine is more the flow, right? The flowiness, the creative side, the intuition, you know. And I always try to describe the tree is the masculine, and the ever changing wind around it is the feminine, right? So I feel like for me, go with the flow nature and the creative side, and allowing yourself to just be, to be able to just feel and to be able to just to express, and against the masculine, which for me would be more the the driving force, the go getter, the planning, the structure, the work, the stuff like that. And I guess everybody has their own definitions and different archetypes of what that means to them.
I think that you are indeed really right on saying everyone has a little bit of their own definitions, because there are a
Mm,
lot of beautiful theories about this. We, for example, have Taoism with yin and yang, which really describes yin as like the receptive and yang as the really
mm,
defined action, where yin is kind of like the earth and yang is kind of like the growth. But then we
mm,
also have Kundalini and Tantra, where we see Shiva as the awareness, the looking, and we see Shakti as the energy and the movement, which is interesting
mm,
because that is kind of different to what you just said. But oftentimes we see the masculine more as the sun and like this bright, and then the feminine more as the moon and receptive.
mm,
To circle back to Shiva Shakti, like Shiva is the sun, it is fire, it's heat, it's
mm,
pure awareness. And then we have Shakti, which is the moon, which is more watery, but also it is really like that energy, because all of us talk about Kundalini as in like, I want all this movement. And that is funny because like this dance is feminine.
mm.
How does that sound to you? Because that's kind of opposite to what you just said. But in a way, it's also similar.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's very, there's, like you said, there's two different ways of, you know, understanding the sun and the moon, and it's just different ways of understanding it. It's like light and dark, isn't it? That again, that balance, that yin and yang, that having to have both to coexist at the same time, to have that that wholeness. So yeah, I think it's interesting to think about it. I
Other
just find it so interesting.
Other examples we have as well is kind of like seeing it as Pachamama Padre Sol, which is something in a lot of
Mm,
the spiritual songs, theories, where we see the earth as like this mom holding us, and then we have the
mm,
sun as a dad giving us energy, which is also this working together. And even if you look in neuroscience, like we have the left brain hemisphere and the right brain hemisphere, which all work differently. Sometimes we're a little bit restrictive for ourselves, where we're like, okay, I'm in my feminine energy and I am now only flowing. In my personal belief, we really need to find this balance between, okay, this is my feminine side, this is my masculine side. How do they dance together? How do they work together?
I think it's very interesting how like it can change. You don't have to be in your masculine and then be in your feminine. Like that, we don't try to constantly always put ourselves in one or the other, right?
Absolutely. A really restricting ourselves in our being if we're only trying to focus on one. And that is also the
Mm,
next topic I would love to go into, is like the interconnectedness of those two energies. To really summarize it shortly, we have the feminine, which is more connected to the moon, to being receptive to this flow state, to creating, to
mm,
also a dance and full of energy. And we have the sun, which is the masculine, which is way more to and organizing and taking action and going for your goal, but also being
mm,
aware. And those two kind of flow together, and they come together inside of you. Only if we have this balanced masculine and feminine flow inside of ourselves, we can find this back into the world. Because in the end, everything around us is a reflection of us inside. If you look at this play together, in general, you can really look at the cycles of the day. If we look at the sun and the moon, we have a couple hours a day where we have the sun. We have a couple hours a day where we have the moon, and they work together. And in that, you can see this interconnectedness. If you look at yin yang, like the sign, we all know it. You can see
mm.
that in the
Wait,
white. Hmm? I have
I
tattooed it
said I
on
have
me. Do
it
you have
tattooed
it?
on you somewhere.
I have it tattooed as
Yeah.
well. I have it on my back. That in this, you can also see that the white has a black dot in it, and the black has a white dot in it, which really represents how they move together. And actually, if you would look into the yin yang sign, you would find that in those little dots, you have a new yin yang sign, and it goes like infinite. How you need the dark and the light together to be whole. And if we're
Mm,
looking more at like Shiva and Shakti and Tantra, allowing the dance of those two polarities, the feminine and the masculine, to move with each other. Because we
mm,
have this consciousness, which is the masculine, which is just presence. And with pure presence, we get nowhere. And we have the Shakti, which is pure energy. With pure energy, we get scattered all over the place. But if they dance
mm,
together and they come together as one, we create a beautiful balance. To make that practical, especially you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. For me,
mm,
I need kind of like this masculine structure to be my feminine flowy in. That is
mm.
really how I see it in my life. I need to create this structure for myself in which I can flow, in which there can be movement, in which there can be creation.
I guess that's where the divine masculine and divine feminine comes in, right? Do you want to touch just quickly on that concept of divine feminine and divine masculine?
I would love to point out that before you go into divine masculine, divine feminine, it's really important to look at like the toxic or the wounded feminine and the
Mm,
toxic and the wounded masculine, because I really believe that right now, also part of why we make this podcast actually about this topic, we don't have a healthy stance on what is masculine and what is feminine. We've created a world altogether where we kind of see the masculine as dangerous and as weak. Um, it's so important to unpack all of these presumptions we have about the masculine and the feminine and how they show up in ourselves. Toxic masculine trait can be being really aggressive and overbearing, where more of a toxic feminine side can really be going too far in victimhood or really manipulating. And before we
mm,
can look at all the beautiful divine play of divine masculine, divine feminine, it's so important to look in, oh, wait, but how am I actually in my unhealthy shadow side, however you want to call it, of the
mm,
masculine and the feminine? Where do I use it as a shield? Like, where do I use, like, oh, I'm in my masculine side, so I'm structured and do do do, just to hide myself? And where I use my, oh, I'm creative and flowy, to not take up the responsibility that I actually have to take up to be a decent human being.
I think for a lot of people listening that aren't familiar with these types of concepts, there may be some men that reject that feminine side, right? By having a lack of feminine is going to show up in so many different ways that you could be emotionally disconnected, right? and unable to express to your partner or to express to your friends. You could be overly controlling to yourself or overly structured, which can lead to stress and burnout and overthinking. And it's very important that we have this duality, because it's, for me personally, I was very much disconnected from all of my emotions, from my creative side. I was disconnected with just letting things be and going with the flow, right? Now I very much like to think that I've integrated the two. When I was last in Pi, when I went traveling, and this is like a big thing I want to touch on as well, is like going traveling and opening my mind up and my experiences and meeting people and being around very feminine women enabled me to really, you know, open that side of me and be able to learn to just relax and let things come to me. And my creative side opened so much. We talk about fire spinning and stuff, right? Like, I would have never even thought that it was possible for me to put together an act, like a fully emotional act, understanding and moving my body and being creative and picturing these things. I never even thought that would be possible for me. That's something that I've developed in, embodying this feminine energy has opened up so many doors for me and opened up such a new level of growth within me by accepting the fact that I get emotional. That doesn't make me less of a man. It doesn't make me less of a person. That is how I used to think before. Something I want to ask you actually, Nadine, because this is something I was going to ask you like today, was I normally find that most of my closest friends are women, right? Now, there'd be some of you guys out there thinking, oh, okay, he's got all of these women around him. There's nothing like that, right? But it is literally, I promise, just anyone that knows me and has known me for years will know that that has been the case. I wonder why. Why would you think maybe that I've always been sort of very much more connected with women? And what do you think?
I would love to bring in one nuance before,
Mm,
because I would love to say that we're talking here about masculine and feminine energy, and we really do not have to think men are disconnected from their feminine,
mm,
women are disconnected from their masculine. There are also a lot of men who are really connected to their feminine and not to their
mm,
masculine, and there are a lot of
mm,
women who are maybe more disconnected from their feminine than disconnected from their masculine. The fact that you're a woman doesn't have to mean that you're connected to your feminine energy, doesn't have to mean that you're having troubles with the masculine energy. It is always really important to just look at yourself from a neutral perspective and not with those ideas of like, I'm a man, so do do do.
mm,
That being said, this is actually a big recurring thing I'm hearing men say so often. Like, it's so much easier to have all of these deep, nice conversations about emotions and feelings with women than with men. I'm like, but do it. Open up that conversation. I know it's uncomfortable. To give an example, I have men and women as my friends, and my relationship is different, but I have beautiful close friendships in which I express emotions, in which I have those conversations about vulnerabilities. And I feel that in the end, it's really up to us to break open those doors to have those conversations. However, to be able to be vulnerable and talk about emotions, you have to be on the same wavelength together. You have to be able to create a space where I can show up as myself and where I can have this brutally honest conversation about, hey, how do you feel? How do I feel? How can we witness each other without
mm,
trying to come up with solutions or getting in this like back and forth blabber? And there, I would say, I think that a lot
mm,
of men have that they are really in their logic brain, where if you talk about a subject, we're gonna look for solutions, which is
mm.
amazing. Sometimes we need someone who helps us find a solution, but that makes it so much more difficult to just be witnessing your emotions. By just witnessing each other in your emotions, you get to that depth and you get to that layer in your friendship that you can maybe find with more women in your life than with more men. But I
Mm,
feel like that is more the inner work that we've done and where we are as a human. And
mm,
sadly, in this world, and now I'm talking about gender and not about energy, it is way more accepted for girls to get together and to talk about everything where men go and watch football. And this is an absolute generalization and it's not true for
Mm,
everyone, but this is something that oftentimes happens. And if this happens over and over again, you get those dynamics. And it's time for all of
mm,
us to break those dynamics. It's, in my opinion, time for men to come together and start talking with each other about their feelings. And it's time for women to also come together and to talk about their feelings. In the future, it is important for everyone to come together and talk, for everyone to come together and be witnessed in our emotions and to break those barriers.
hmm. I 100% agree. I would love to say more men do need to speak, and I would. I'm always going to shout out the men's work that I do. Um, I feel like it's becoming a lot easier for men to talk to men. I feel like over the years it's been very, very difficult, and still now it's very hard for a lot of men to speak about their emotions. So I feel like going back to my point on why maybe I have closer relationships with women is because can get that depth, that I maybe just can't get from some of the men friends that I have. Um, like you said, it's very important that men come together to talk about their emotions and about their feelings. There's a lot that we can relate on. I used to do a lot of work with a men's group down here in the south coast of the UK, and it was amazing work that we did to sit down and speak about emotions together. And it was very raw and very hard at the start. I always will shout out men's mental health because it's something I'm very passionate about and it's something I care a lot about. And I always offer help to any men wanting to talk about their emotions, about anything. Over time, society has created this view that we can't talk and that it's weak to talk. And it's not, it's a complete opposite. It's like a superpower to be able to do that and to be able to share. And I think there's a lot to be learned from women, from the feminine energy, in the terms of, for me, it's created this such sense of peace and happiness within me, don't get me wrong, understanding your emotions is a complete different ball game. That could be tough at times, and there's a lot of darkness and shadow in there. But I
I would
really love this topic.
absolutely second you. You obviously host men's circles. I
Mm,
have my online women's circle, and a lot of deep healing I've done is in my women's circles. Also, the women's circles I've attended over the 7 years I've been doing that is has been so strong for me. And the interesting part is the most deep experiences I've had wasn't even speaking about everything, doing the most deep spiritual practices or having the toughest conversations. It was just the presence, being able
mm,
to enter a room where you feel seen and you can be and where you can relate to each other. And I feel that that relating is something that we kind of like lost in nowadays world because
mm,
we're both blessed where we have beautiful friendships where a lot of tough conversations, because let's be honest, some of those conversations are extremely uncomfortable and hard and not easy,
mm,
but they're also so helpful and healing. And we are so lucky to have those people around me, which is also why I started my online women's circle to bring that to everyone. Because I truly believe that every woman or everyone who identifies as a woman needs a space to be held with just women, to be witnessed, to be able to hear, hey, I'm not alone in these problems. And I
mm,
also strongly believe that men need that exact same space. And my ideal future would be that we bring unity back into the world, which is first unity inside by looking honestly inside of ourselves and being like, hey, what is my masculine side? What is my feminine side? What are ideas that have been projected onto me? What is what I really feel? Which things do I
mm,
need to purge out? Like, which emotions have I suppressed? And then, how can I bring this harmony and this unity into the rest of the world with the people directly around me, or with the influence I have through my job, or with my presence on social media? And how can we bring that
mm.
back? Because we've kind of like lost that touch with this unity.
100%. I have an idea. I've got a little game for us to play, okay? I've got a little game for us to play. I'm gonna give you some prompts and um decide whether they are feminine or masculine, okay? So the first one I'm gonna give you is making a detailed 5-year plan.
I would absolutely qualify this as masculine because
Okay.
this is really like structure and this is the direction. This is the perfect example of Taoism masculine where we're super
Yeah.
directed and we're like
Dialed in.
going this way.
100%. I think you're completely right. Dialed in, like that fully, eyes down, let's do this. Okay, next one. Okay, going with the flow on a spontaneous trip.
Ooh. Since we're saying going with the flow, I really would call this just the feminine, just moving, just
Mm,
allowing things to happen. Like, just letting it move the way it wants to move. Being more intuitive as well, which is also a really feminine trait.
Okay, next one. Providing emotional support for a friend. I like to say I've completely thrown this on the Dean. Like she has no idea this was coming.
I honestly struggle answering this because my initial idea would be feminine, but I really
Mhm,
am conscious of the fact that that is also partially like all of the ideas and all of the like character
mm,
traits I have in the stereotype of being a woman, where I feel like offering support can also be a masculine trait. So
yeah.
I would honestly say that this is not masculine or feminine.
It's like in my case, right? I would like to think that I can be an emotional support for a lot of my friends. Therefore, I'm as a man embodying a feminine trait or the feminine energy. So this is where I wanted to like get into this, and the point is that the women and man can embody both energies, right? In both these situations. So it's not about women or man, like be men being, you know, as in being the gender those roles, but actually the energy itself, right? So, like, if we say the next one, taking charge in a crisis, so those real crisis moments, in my opinion, that would be a more masculine energy because it's like, okay, bloody well, this one needs to happen. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure this happens here.
But I
Whereas,
also would say that it can be a feminine thing because feminine is also creation and coming up with like solutions outside of the box. Where if you take a little step back and you allow emotions to flow through and just feel and listen to your intuition, you can quickly come up with a solution that is outside the box. And I would also say that in those like difficult situations, we have to listen to our intuition. Intuition is more a feminine trait.
yeah,
So it is interesting
I
to
know.
kind of
Again,
like,
the dance. I think with both using the two and having the dance between the two is why it's so important in them scenarios. So I think like having one or less of the other is really gonna, you know, give you a different outcome.
in the end, also, I feel like it is kind of like a myth to say, I'm only in my feminine, I'm only in my masculine. It's not
Mm,
possible. You're a combination of the two. And of course, there is different like percentages if you want to talk numbers inside of yourself. Like you're 100% you, and a percentage of this is masculine, percentage of this is feminine energy. And those percentages constantly change. Like maybe right
mm,
now, I am like 80% feminine, 20% masculine. And then maybe in an hour, I will be more masculine than feminine. Like this flows and this changes constantly. It's not something that we can grasp, and that is
mm.
also the funny and interesting thing with energy.
I have another question for you, actually, if you don't mind. Let's just say, for instance, for a man that identifies as a man and is looking to bring more of a feminine energy into their field. How how would they go about doing that? what are some practices or sort of things they could be doing to bring more of that in?
Absolutely. I would love to give another practice before I answer this. I will go into what do we do to cultivate more feminine energy into our life, but I really find it important with those things to fill into what is natural for ourselves first. So what can be good for someone who wants to either tap into the masculine or feminine is to take the time, maybe 15 minutes, grab 3 pieces of paper, set
Mm,
a timer for 5 minutes, write up masculine, and write down all the character traits they think they have or what they do to cultivate those character traits for the masculine. Repeat the same, again, a timer for 5 minutes for the feminine, and write down all of those character traits and all of those actions they do to connect with that. And then in the last one, just write down your own name. In my instance, it would be Nadine, and write down how I have this dance of masculine and feminine inside of myself. And by giving yourself a timer of 5 minutes each time, you will push yourself to just write down without overthinking it. And it is really important to create your view on yourself first before we're gonna listen and just become a parrot and rephrase whatever someone else is telling us.
mm,
That being said,
100%.
if we want to cultivate the feminine creative more, a really beautiful way is through the body. Like, for example, this may sound a bit silly. Just putting on some nice music, you can lock yourself up in a
Mm,
room, go into nature, and just dance. And getting outside, but really just allowing the body to move the way it wants to move. So it can be really uncomfortable to put in your music and start dancing. You may feel like,
mm,
oh, this is so weird. But by doing that, you allow the energy to flow through you. And another way can
mm.
be by just creating, like grabbing a piece of paper and just flowing and
I love
like
to do
make an artwork.
that.
And it
It's so
doesn't have
much
to be
fun.
pretty. It
No, it's
is.
so
It's
much fun.
amazing.
Yeah.
And by seeing this creating like either the dancing or creating a painting as just something you do without being
Mm,
attached to the outcome allows you to kind of like get out of this brain and just get in the flow and get in the body and just allow it to happen.
mm. I feel like as well, like another one would be just learning to rest and learning to just sit, you know? For me, it used to be a huge issue. Just being able to sit and not do anything and just be with myself was such a hard thing to do. It was like I always need to be doing something. I always need to be doing this or thinking about this. And by sitting and by relaxing and by being with ourselves, it gives us that chance to really feel into what we're feeling. I know a lot of men from working with men, I know it's hard for men to do that because by sitting and not doing anything, then we start to think. And it's the thinking part that a lot of men struggle with because it becomes so overwhelming because they just don't know how to process those thoughts or how to understand the thoughts or where they're coming from. That I feel like a good practice for a lot of men to do would be to sit and to just try to be with yourself, just even for 10 minutes. I often do this when I feel like something's not quite right, and I feel like I just need to sit and just be with myself and just to work it out and have a think and really sit with it. And sometimes I don't think anything. Sometimes I just sit there, and it's nice to just sit down for 10 minutes.
Sitting down for 10 minutes is amazing if you're able to.
Mm,
And if you're not in the best mental health state or you have a lot of emotions that you're suppressing, sitting down
mm,
and not doing anything can be hell on earth. I
mm,
remember when I just got into meditation, like I hated every second of it because I started sitting with myself and I started feeling emotions, and it would be just, I would be crying, sobbing, and so many things would come up. And it can be easier to listen to some music and go for a walk so you're moving the body and
mm,
it's softer, and ease into that and be nice to yourself, because it can be counterproductive to right now be like, okay, I have to reconnect with myself, I'm going to sit there and feel all the negative feelings. And
mm.
some people enjoy that, and learn from it.
Mm.
And for some people, it's counterproductive. They do it once, they do it twice, and they're like, no, I do not want to connect with myself. It can be good to go for a walk, or maybe to give yourself a massage, maybe take a really long
Mm.
shower, or create something. And not writing, because with writing, we're going to think again. But if we
Mm.
just make some art, or we do something else with the hands, like maybe working in the garden really works for you. Maybe cooking really works for you. It is easier to allow yourself to go into this state of resting, and also
Mm.
to give yourself those set times of like, okay, maybe on Sunday I will stay in bed for an hour longer, instead of
Mm.
forcing yourself into it. We cannot go from one extreme to the other extreme and expect magic to happen. Finding that stillness comes with facing the chaos inside of us.
Mm. I feel like it's finding your own way, right? I feel like with most of this, stuff is finding what works for you. And there's like Nadine said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever works for you. You just take it at your own pace, and you allow yourself to go on this journey. At your own pace. And some paces others. Some people will just like to like do whatever they feel is comfortable for them. But I feel like trying new things in general is like you said, taking a piece of paper and just write it, like drawing and just scribbling and just letting it flow and using colors and being creative.
I feel that it is also so important to ask for support. Like, you
Mm.
can ask someone who does specific practices, or even to our friends. Like, if it's really difficult for you to take that time to just be with yourself, have a chat with one of your best friends and just sit together with a cup of tea. If it's too difficult for you to reconnect with yourself by yourself, do it in coexistence with another human being.
Mm.
Ask one of your friends, hey, do you want maybe to next weekend take a day where we relax but we are together? Or asking for support is such an underestimated tool. I remember when I was like still studying and living in Rotterdam with all of my friends, some of my friends even pointed out, you are never alone. Where now I'm like, wait, I saw a few people today. It's enough. I can go on for like days without talking to anybody.
Mm.
So that is something you kind
Yeah.
of train and feel and learn.
Mm. I guess that's one thing I value about our friendship deeply, is that we can just have conversation about these topics. And sometimes it's hard to do that. And I feel like sometimes a lot of people are so quick to jump into like an argument. Like, so some people are so quickly to, no, you're wrong, I'm right, like this is wrong. And I'm sure a lot of people have friends like this too, that just really understand that we're two different people, we have two different opinions, we both have our rights and wrongs. And yeah, I feel like it's good to have somebody like that in your life that you can talk to openly and honestly.
Absolutely. I totally agree this, and I'm really, really grateful. I feel like it is almost a form of art to be able to have those conversations without trying to convince the other person.
Hmm.
But what it takes for a human being, in my perspective, to have those conversations is to get to know yourself, because we can only meet someone for as deep as they have gotten to know themselves. I feel like it's so beautiful to just be open and flowy and be both in your own stance without convincing each other, without trying to be right or wrong, but just having this open chat.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. Like you said, having this open chat, and for people listening, they're sat here with us having this conversation. And we want to hear like what you think of this topic. We'd love to hear your feedback, what you think. And let's open a conversation in the comments and just get talking about it. And I mean, this is just scratching the surface. Like, let's be honest, like this is scratching the surface of most topics. Obviously, there is a lot more detail to go into with a lot of these topics.
I would love to actually ask anyone who is listening, if there is a topic you're like, I want to hear them talk about this, please just send us a message, because
Mm.
we're creating this for you guys, and it's absolutely nourishing to my soul. Like, I'm with huge smile, and we're also doing it for you. So please let us know in what way you would like this to go.
What are we talking about next week?
Oh, next week I would love to scratch on a little bit of the differences between spirituality and modern day living.
Okay, cool. Gonna wrap this one up. It's been myself, Jack,
And me, Nadim.
Nadine, and this has been Bridger Universe's episode 2. Join us for episode 3 coming very, very soon. Take care of yourselves, and we'll speak to you all very, very soon.
Have a beautiful day.